Oli here, and this is my review of The Ark in Space, the second story of the 12th season of classic Doctor Who, starring Tom Baker as the 4th Doctor. The Ark in Space is the 76th story overall. It's 4 parts long and is written by Robert Holmes. The Ark in Space is the first story to be produced by Philip Hinchcliffe, and the first story in which Robert Holmes is the script editor, and thus starting the Hinchcliffe era, which many classic Who fans consider to be the very best of classic Who. So obviously, sorry for the delay in review because I've been busy reviewing these stuff. So I have some free time, so let me get the next couple of reviews over and done with, and let's continue, shall we, with the plot of The Ark in Space. The TARDIS lands on a space station orbiting Earth in the distant future. It's seemingly deserted, but the Doctor, Sarah, and Harry soon discover they're not alone. Thousands of humans are in cryogenic sleep, and whilst they've slept, the Ark has been invaded. A parasitic insect race, the Wirren, have taken control and threaten the very future of mankind. The Ark in Space, in my opinion, is a brilliant story and is very enjoyable as well. I can see why many classic Whovians consider this to be one of the very best of Tom Baker's era. And I would actually say the same as well. And Stephen Moffat and Russell T Davies have even sung their praises about this story, so I'm not surprised about that they actually did this. The production of The Ark in Space was fantastic though. I admire the creativity that went behind the story, especially the space station Nerva set and the model that we saw of it and parts of the story. They both looked very cool, and I was really impressed by what they were able to do, considering the fact it's in the 1970s. The direction by Rodney Bennett was brilliant, and I believe this is his first contribution to Doctor Who, and he did a very good job in his first go, I must say. And I can tell that the script was brilliant. I loved the dialogue and stuff behind this episode, and I love how despite this story was actually quite tough to make come to life, because I think the original story was actually written by John Lucarotti, who wrote some First Doctor stories, but I think he was in a situation where he couldn't communicate with Robert Holmes, so Robert Holmes pretty much had to do the script himself, and he and John Lucarotti still got paid for it. So I think that was a pretty cool job by Robert Holmes and John Lucarotti as well, because he was one that pretty much came up with the Ark in Space, his plot of the story. And Tom Baker even named this story to be the favorite he's ever filmed, because considering the fact his favorite is coming from in very early points in his era, pretty much says a lot about this story. The plot of this story was great as well. Oh, and you can tell from this point, Doctor Who is starting to actually change the shift in tone, because the Hinchcliffe era is known for its gothic horror element, and how stories, especially in season 13, are pretty much based on classic horror movies and stuff like that. And mixed with sci-fi as well. And the Ark in Space definitely showcased that gothic horror element of it, especially with Noah slowly transforming into the ruin with the body horror and stuff like that. It was pretty cool, considering the fact that they used bubble wrap, and a lot of fans actually call that the killer bubble wrap. It's quite cool as well. I want to see, and I think part one, I think, will probably one of the best of actually the best of the entire thing, because it had Tom Baker, Elizabeth Sladen, and Ian Marter just there carrying the story itself. It was really cool, and plus we got the doctor's human race speech, and I think that was probably a very cool scene, and probably my favorite scene of the entire story. Obviously, the Ark in Space had some very incredible moments, as mentioned in the scene, and we see Noah mid transformation into the Ririn, especially with the killer bubble wrap, and that was pretty cool to see and quite scary as well. And you also love the Doctor's human race speech, and as I mentioned before, I believe that's probably one of my favorite Doctor Who speeches ever. And you can really tell Tom Baker was really doing his best in that scene, and I can tell he was really having fun with the story. Despite it's not necessarily a fun story, but you can tell he was really enjoying filming the story, and I think he really liked being the Doctor here. So on to the performances, which I would say was very good. And Tom Baker did an awesome job, and I like how he's proven that he's suited to play the Doctor. His Doctor is actually going through a change of character himself, and to fit the serious tone the Doctor Who is currently going to take him, but his goofy style still pretty much remains, as we've seen in this story. It's great that he's going through this change, because it's a good thing that we're not seeing the overtly goofy side of him that we saw in Robot. I mean, it shows that the Fourth Doctor can be serious the occasion calls for it to be serious. And as I mentioned before, I love his human race speech. It showcased how wonderful the actor Tom Baker is and how brilliant the Fourth Doctor is. I also like the scene where he was berating Sarah Jane because she was stuck in the ventilation shaft. That's because he was doing it so she can get out, even though it was very funny, problematic yes, but still it worked. But it was quite funny. And the way he was like, he switched to like serious, and he was calling her like a useless girl. We shouldn't have trusted you. And then as soon as Sarah got out, he was like, I'm very proud of you. You can. I just love the chemistry between Tom Baker and Elizabeth Sladen. I mean, I think they probably have like the best Doctor companion chemistries of all time. It's really cool to see as well. So speaking of Elizabeth Sladen, I think she did an amazing job in the story as well. And her and Harry actually got to do a lot in the story, and I really like that. And as I mentioned before, I like how Sarah Jane was able to, how she was able to volunteer and crawl inside the ventilation shaft, even though she got stuck there. And I liked how she was offended by the doctor's comments by calling her useless and stuff like that. And then when she got out, the doctor was praising her. She was like, "I've been duped again." Yes, and I also liked how Sarah Jane was, how she was able, how her curiosity got the better of her when she entered that room, but when she failed to get the doctor and Harry's attention, but she ended up like almost dying of oxygen source shortage, and then she ends up getting teleported to the cryogenic pod. That was pretty cool as well. Ian Martin did a brilliant job as Harry Sullivan, and Harry was the indirect cause of the TARDIS landing on the Nova because I think he messed around with the homic regulators. Harry also did a lot in the story, and I like how well he shines here. He's loyal to the Doctor, and is shown here because he said that the Brigadier told him to watch over the Doctor, and it was pretty cool. And I think Ian Martin did a brilliant job as Harry in this story, and I think this is probably one of his best performances as Harry at this point in time. I actually find it funny how Harry was pretty much walking around the story in his socks because his shoes got destroyed early in the story, and I think towards the end he decided to put on some wellies. So, and as I mentioned before in the robot review, I like the banter he had with Sarah Jane, and it was actually really funny when he calls her old girl, and especially there was one scene when Sarah Jane came to after being knocked unconscious by the oxygen shortage that Harry was calling her old girl, and Sarah was like, "If you call me old girl one more time, I'll spit in your eye." And I obviously love the chemistry between the Doctor, Sarah Jane, and Harry. To the side cast, considering the fact there was not a whole lot of them, and most of them ended up dying. One died in the middle of the story, and the other dying for the resolution of this story. But they're all very good. First off, we had Vira. She was one of the humans that was put in suspended animation, and she was one of the first to wake up. She was pair bonded with Noah, the commander, and the antagonist of the story, and she teams up with Noah to she teams up with the Doctor to defeat Noah and Ririn. She was a good character and she was pretty cool. I loved her enthusiasm when the main conflict had been resolved, and she was looking forward to what plans she had for the future. I say she's the best side character of the story because she was very interesting as well, and I like how she was pretty much the main cause of trying to help the Doctor defeat the Ririn. Now we also had Rogue, and he was another human put in suspended animation, and he woke up later into the story. He noticed things were not right, and he helped the Doctor defeat the Ririn. He later sacrificed himself when he died from the exhaust blast from I think it was the escape pod that they were operating in for power. I think he was a good character. We also had Lysat. He was another member of the humans that was put in suspended animation. He didn't do much, and he didn't really appear a whole lot because he pretty much died quite early into the story, and he was killed by Ririn Grub. We also had Libri. He was an engineer, and he sensed that Nora had been taken over by the Ririn, but aligned himself with Nora for a short period of time until the Doctor pretty much won him around, and the Doctor asked him to look at Noah, but then Noah ended up shooting Libri to death. Despite a small cast, they all did an amazing job. So the enemy of the Ark in Space was Noah slash the Ririn. Noah was a commander and woke up from suspended animation thanks to Vera. He didn't trust the Doctor and pretty much threatened to kill the Doctor, Sarah, and Harry. And obviously, he came into contact with the Rowan, and it was slowly transforming his body, and his body was slowly transforming into the Rowan, and it was very good as well. I think both and the Rowan obviously were parasitic insects that come from the Andromeda galaxy, and not much is said revealed about them in the story, but they were pretty much. I think one of the Rowan that was inside that got inside the ark was had later died. I can't remember why, and then it later caused I think all the humans to wake up a bit later than intended. So I think Noah and the Ruin were very good villains, and it seemed as the Ruin took over Noah. It seemed that he didn't have any bit of humanity left in him. But when Noah did actually sacrifice himself alongside the Ruin fleet in order to save the day, and I really like that aspect, right? Especially when he contacted the Nerva to speak to Vera, and she said Vera goodbye, and then he pretty much just died. So on to the thoughts of the story. I did have some thoughts of this story on my second or third rewatches of it, but since I rewatched it recently, I think those thoughts are pretty much gone. But I do think that this story I think part two did hit a bit of a snag in terms of the pacing. It really slowed down the overall story. It did pick up in part three and continued in part four, but I think the ending was rushed a little bit in part four. But the overall pacing was very good, and I must say that I think part two, I think it just hit a little bit of a snag there. So in my opinion, the Ark in Space is without a doubt one of the best Robert Holmes scripts, and with a very enjoyable plot, good character development, and great side cast. Despite the fact there weren't like four others there, but it was still pretty good. A near perfect story, and I'll give the Ark in Space a 9.5 out of 10. My next review will be the Sontaran Experiment, so stay tuned for that. Thank you for watching this review. Please let me know your thought of the Ark in Space and this review as well. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already, and click the notification bell so you can have an idea of when I've actually posted the video. And feel free to join my Discord server. It's still open, so feel free to come on by. Until then, see you later.